Okay guys, if you clicked on this episode, this is actually an unlisted link that can be only available in the 10th episode of Season 11, or in my playlist of all the videos that I've created in August. Now in any case, we're back in Kirby Star Allies once again to start our first bonus episode of Season 11. And, of course, we're going to head into Guest Star Heroes one final time to finally wrap this game mode up. And what better way to wrap the game mode up than to go ahead and tackle through the last of the game and tackle through all of the Room Guardians that are associated with every single character. So why not go ahead and do that right now? Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and go through every single Guest Star Heroes Room Guardian in every single character in World 5. So without further ado, let's go! Okay, now just to let you know, all this footage that you're going to see right now is of me going through each of the Room Guardians with only one character. And since there's no commentary associated with them, I'm going to use a voiceover to better get an identification of what's going on here, okay? Now, in any case, if you're using characters like Blade Knight, Sir Kibble, or Biospark, then you're going to have to face against multiple versions of that enemy while going through this in Guest Star Heroes in World 5 when you get to the first checkpoint. There's nothing much I can say about them. They function the same like your regular standard foes as expected. But I'm not going to really get into detail with those because those aren't the interesting ones that I'm here to discuss about. Now, the ones that I will get into further detail with is actually with the mini-boss characters and dream characters. I'll explain why I think it makes sense for them to have those specific mini-bosses, why I think it doesn't make any sense to have them make them have that mini-boss, or either why that one particular thing only appears in that one particular instance and such like that. Now, I'm not going to really get into detail with the enemy characters, like I said, because they don't really have that much to them in comparison to the Dream and Mini-Boss characters, okay? Now, a couple of other things I want to note. 6 of the footages that I've recorded were actually recorded from my gym TV, because most of the footage that I recorded was actually from my parents' television, but not 6 of the footages. So if you see those 4, little doodads on the top left corner of the screen, that means they're recorded from the gym TV, okay? Just to let you know, alright? Regardless of that, the other things I want to mention as well, the other thing I want to note too is that on the bottom left corner of your screen, I have customized some of these characters' adventures and gave them different names based on which one I think may be the best one for that particular character or something like that. So keep that in mind, okay? And also beneath that, you'll also see if it has a specific Room Guardian, like a multiple version of an enemy, or either a mini-boss that they have to face against, okay? Anyways, I'm just gonna let myself be quiet for now, and I'll let you look at all these Room Guardians, so enjoy! And by the way, the part where I mentioned that Blade Knight, Sir Kibble, and Biospark will have multiple versions of that enemy, there are only 20 characters in this entire Guest Star Heroes mode that will actually have that principle. And they are shown on screen right now. These are the only 20 characters to have multiple versions of a certain enemy. All the other 17 characters have mini-bosses, okay? So, just to let you know. But anyways, back into the actual film. Okay, now onto the mini-boss characters. If you're using a character like Bonkers, then you'll have to face against the twin Bonkers as your main mini-bosses. Meaning you'll have to face against both Bonkers and Dark Bonkers back there. They function the same like your normal, typical, standard mini-bosses, so they don't really have that many changes from the past time you met them. So you should be able to take care of them with no issues whatsoever. And, Bonkers is actually the most common mini-boss used in this mode, depending on which guest star hero you use during the events of this mode. So that's one thing I wanted to keep in mind with y'all, okay? So, yeah. Now, if you're using a character like Bugsy, then you'll have to face against the twin Bugsies as your main mini-bosses. Meaning you'll have to face against both Bugsy and my worst enemy, Dark Bugsy, back there. There's not much I can say about them. They function the same like your typical standard mini-bosses, and, this was a pretty close victory that I've gotten because Bugsy was kind of low on HP at one point, but he was still able to prove this victory against the two Bugsies. So, yeah, like I said, nothing much I can say about it, but yeah. They function the same like your normal, typical, standard mini-boss, and Bugsy was the second most used mini-boss in this mode, but he wasn't used as much compared to that of Bonkers, so keep that in mind. Next, if you're using a character like Chef Kawasaki, then you'll have to face against the twin Chef Kawasakis as your mini-bosses. One thing I want to note is this is the only time that the regular Chef Kawasaki will ever appear in this room. There's no other place in the game except this specific time, if you're playing as Chef Kawasaki, that the regular one will appear in this room. The dark one will be mentioned again much later in this video, but this is the only time that the regular Chef Kawasaki will ever appear in this room, which kind of sucks, yeah, but, you know, there you go. Anyways, time for one final cooking win before we get to the next one. And our last mini-boss character. Finally, for our last mini-boss character, if you're using a character like Vividria, then you'll have to face against the twin Vividrias. This is the only time that the Dark Vividria will appear in this room, since the regular one will be mentioned much later in the series. And by the way, the Dark one actually functions a bit differently from the last time we met it in the ability room, because it uses the other attack that it didn't use back when we last went through the ability room in World 5 in story mode in the 5th episode. So that's one thing I want to keep in mind with you guys. But regardless, they function the same like before, and basically just that. So, now that we're done with mentioning all the mini-boss characters, onto the dream characters. Alright, so let's immediately get Bandana Waldi's Room Guardians out of the way. Remember when I said that this was the only time that the regular Chef Kawasaki and the Dark Vividria will ever appear in this room? Well, I wasn't kidding. Bandana Waldi is actually the only character that doesn't have the same twin mini-boss treatment as the other characters, and he'll instead receive Dark Chef Kawasaki and Vividria as his mini-bosses. They function the same like in that mini-boss battle that you had with them back in World 2's second secret level, except with, of course, Dark Chef Kawasaki and not the regular Chef Kawasaki. So that's why I had to talk about this right now. Anyways, on to the next couple of dream characters. Next, if you're using characters like Marks, Dark Meta Knight, or Susie, then you'll have to face against the twin Mr. Frosties as your mini-bosses. Now, the one thing I'm going to say is that for dream characters in DLC packs 1, 2, and 3, they'll have a glunk added into their battles to make it a little bit harder, but I immediately get rid of the glunks to make this easier for me to get rid of the mini-bosses, okay? Now, in any case, I think it makes perfect sense for Marks to have Mr. Frosty as his own twin mini-boss guardian, as Mr. Frosty did appear in Kirby Superstar and in Kirby Superstar Ultra as a mini-boss, Though it would also make sense to have Bonkers or Bugsy as his main room guardians as well. Same for Chef Kawasaki. But they decided to go with Marks and with Mr. Frosty in this case. So I guess I can see why they decided to choose that. Dark Meta Knight is another character that I think also makes sense to have Mr. Frosty as his twin room guardian, as Mr. Frosty also appeared in Kirby and the Amazing Mirror as a main mini-boss there. But it would also make sense for Bonkers to be Dark Meta Knight's room guardian as well, but Nintendo decided to go with Mr. Frosty on this one. So I guess it makes sense in some sort of way why they decided to go with Mr. Frosty, but I think it just would have been a little bit better for him to actually have Bonkers or something like that. But I guess in some cases, I think I can see why they decided to go with this one. Finally, I think the strangest selection of having the twin Mr. Frosties as a mini-boss is actually with Susie, because even though Mr. Frosty did appear in Kirby Planet Robobot as a mini-boss, he only appeared in the sub-game Team Kirby Clash as a mini-boss, and not in the actual, main game itself. So I don't really understand why they decided to go with Mr. Frosty on this one, because, he didn't appear in the actual main game as a mini-boss. But I think it would have been better if Taranza actually had the Mr. Frosties instead of Susie. So I don't think it makes sense of why Susie got the twin Mr. Frosty treatment, but somehow Nintendo thought that giving her Mr. Frosty would be a good pick. But I just kind of think this was kind of strange. But either way, on to the next group of mini-bosses. Next up, if you're using characters like Meta Knight, Gooey, Taranza, or Adelina Ribbon, then you'll have to face against the twin Bugsies as your mini-bosses again in the same way like Bugsy did in his story. So, Meta Knight makes perfect sense for him to actually have Bugsy as the main mini-boss, as Bugsy and Meta Knight did make their first appearance in Kirby's Adventure for the NES, so it makes perfect sense for Meta Knight to actually have Bugsy as his main group of mini-bosses. Though, technically, it would also make sense for him to get Mr. Frosty as well, but they decided to go with Bugsy on this one, so in some way it makes some sort of sense. Gooey's was a bit trickier to pen down, because even though Bugsy didn't appear in Kirby's Dream Land 3 as a mini-boss, Gooey could technically throw people around with a throw ability in the same way like Bugsy, Knuckle Joe, and Beetle can do it, as well as Kirby with the Fighter, Beetle, and Suplex abilities. So I guess it makes some sense in some sort of ways why Gooey got the Bugsies as his main mini-bosses, but I just don't really get why they decided to go with the, the two bug enemies for Gooey, because to be honestly, I would have chose a different room guardian for Gooey, honestly, in my view, okay? Because I don't think it makes sense for Gooey to actually have Bugsy in my view, but, that's just me, okay? Taranza's was another tricky one to pin down because Bugsy didn't appear in Kirby Triple Deluxe as a mini-boss, And to me, this would have been perfect if Mr. Frosty were to be Tyranta's Room Guardian, because Mr. Frosty did appear in Triple Deluxe in the main game as a mini-boss. But I guess the reason why they decided to go with Bugsy was because Tyranta is technically a bug, and since Bugsy 2 is also a bug, they just kind of figured it would make sense for Tyranta to have Bugsy as a mini-boss. Plus, Triple Deluxe also had a mini-boss bug in it called Hornhead, so I guess it makes sense why they decided to go with Bugsy on this one, but then again, you know what I'm saying, I think, you know, Mr. Frosty would have made much more sense, but that's just me. Finally, in my honest view, the strangest choice of having the twin Bugsies as a Room Guardian is actually with Adeline and Ruben, because Bugsy never appeared in Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards as a mini-boss, and combine that with the fact that Adeline and Ruben go down in 3 hits, and having my worst enemy in there in the mix as well, doesn't make this a good mini-boss choice for Adeline and Ruben, honestly. I don't really understand why Nintendo thought it was a good idea for her to have the twin Bugsies as the main Room Guardian, because honestly speaking, I think Adeline and Ruben should have had Twin Vividria as a mini-boss. I think it would have made much more sense that way than it was to have the twin Bugsies as a mini-boss. So I don't really understand why they decided to go with Bugsy out of all characters, but that's just a little something that I wanted to point out to you guys. Anyways, moving on to the last 5 characters. Finally, if you're playing as characters like Rickon & Co., DeRoach, Magalore, the Sebastian Sisters, or King DDD, then you'll have to face against the twin Bonkers as your mini-bosses. Rickon & Co. is the only character I see that doesn't make sense to have Bonkers as a mini-boss, because he never appeared in Kirby's Dream Land 2 as a mini-boss. Mr. Frosty, however, did make an appearance in that game as a mini-boss from what I saw, so I think it would have made much more sense for Rick and Kine & Co. to actually have Mr. Frosty as a Room Guardian, but apparently Nintendo decided to go with Bonkers on this one, so that kind of didn't make any sense to me. DeRoach is, in my view, one of the characters that makes sense to have Bonkers as a Room Guardian, since he did appear in Kirby's Squeak Squad as a mini-boss. Though it would technically also make sense, too, if DeRoach were to get, Mr. Frosty 2 as a mini-boss, but Nintendo decided to go with Bonkers on this one, so at least this character makes much more sense than Rickon & Co. for crying out loud, so at least to me anyway. Magalore is another character that also makes sense to have Bonkers as his main Room Guardian, as Bonkers was actually the only mini-boss that returned in Kirby's Return to Dreamland as a returning mini-boss, as the other 6 were pretty much all new. So this made perfect sense for Magalore to actually have Bonkers as his Room Guardian. So this made perfect sense. To me, I can see why they decided to go with Twin Bonkers, but I think this is kind of a waste to me, because Bonkers was already used for 4 other Dream characters, so that totals that out to 5 times that Twin Bonkers was used as a mini-boss for these characters, so I thought it was kind of a waste that the Sebastian sisters got Twin Bonkers as a mini-boss to me. I mean, it would have been better if they got Chef Kawasaki and Dark Vividria as a mini-boss, so it can be the same treatment like Bandana Wild E did, but sadly that did not happen, so that kind of sucks. Finally, King DDD is the last character to also have Twin Bonkers as the mini-boss, and I think this makes perfect sense, given that King DDD has Hammer with him, so I think this makes perfect sense for him to have Bonkers as a Twin Guardian. And by the way, if you're wondering why I mentioned about all the Bonkers Twin matches last, it's mainly because in versions 1.0 and 2.0 of the game, there's a glitch that allowed you to play as Kirby, but he also receives Twin Bonkers as a mini-boss as well, besides just the other 5 characters that I just discussed about. So that's why I mentioned about that guy last, giving credit to the user that had this footage. Okay, we may have beaten every single Room Guardian in this game. We may have beaten all the enemies in mini-bosses, as well as all the other bosses found in Story Mode and in Guest Star Heroes. But I don't think Guest Star Heroes is done just yet. There is actually one more thing I want to discuss with this mode before we wrap it up. As you can see on screen, remember when I said that I was going to try to beat this with every character? Well, I wasn't kidding. I have beaten this with pretty much every single character, and you can see all of their corresponding times to show how fast I was able to beat them. Now this one I had to actually use 2-player, but this is the only one case where I had to use 2-player. Other than that, though, all the other characters I just used 1-player. The only character I didn't actually beat this with is actually with King DDD. This guy here. But you may be asking, does this really have a point in this episode? Well, it does actually. I'm going to actually showcase something extra that happens when you beat Guest Star Heroes with every character. However, rather than just going through the entire thing, I'm going to actually speed this up and just cut right to the chase as soon as we get to the final 3 battles. So, let's finish this up. Alright, just to let you know, I couldn't all the way to this point where I wasn't saying Tarzan, so I'm with Gooby and of course the other characters. Man, I mean, I know they say Meta Knight is broken, but dang! He just destroyed her, man! I mean, goes to show you that King DDD ain't no pest to mess with. But dang, son. Alright, Efficient Doom. Highness, let's go! Just get out of here! Get out of my face! What do you even think this even is anymore? This isn't a boss rush series or anything, but wow, bruh. King DDD just demolished them, bruh. I'm telling you, King DDD is broken. You guys don't understand. He really is broken. So yeah, I also got Burden and Parasoality on the team, but yeah. Credits going. No, I'm not gonna skip it. I've seen this 36 times now. I think I can see it one last time. Here he comes. The warrior is back. One final time. He's back. Let's go. You guys know what to do. Tempora Warrior, Galactonite.
actual deal, though. No. Here he is. The true warrior's back now. Reborn Butterfly.
More of a night. And by the way, this is the nightmare music playing this time. Get him, Keeny Diddy. Hey, not looking too bad so far, though. Look at King Diddy go, man. King Diddy, man. I mean, y'all don't understand. King Diddy's broken, bruh. I know they say Meta Knight's broken too, but ridiculous, man. He just completely demolished Morphinite, man. Dang, son. With that amount of strength, you'd think nobody like King Dedede could be that strong. Well, there you go. There's your proof right there that I love King Dedede a lot. 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 9 seconds? I'll take it. I'll take those. You've cleared this mode with all tree friends, who are now heroes in their own right. You are the master of friends. My pleasure. I was able to beat this with every character. Thank you. So you're probably wondering what happens now that you beat this with every character. Well, I'm gonna show you. Look at this huge party, bro. I've beaten it with a load of characters, bro. This goes to show you how much I had to go through for one thing. I had to work my butt off just to try to get that far in the game. That dope picture. That last picture you're gonna see. Listen to this music. Does this music sound familiar? Well, it should. This is actually Kirby's Return to Dreamland's title screen, heard in Kirby Triple Deluxe. I never thought they were actually going to use this theme until I heard this for the first time. So, that was really interesting that they used this theme when you clear it 100%. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for the first bonus episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I've had a lot of fun playing this game. And the next episode of the Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser's Hero's Journey Boss Rush episode, I'm gonna try to release it sometime on the 22nd. I haven't decided how that's gonna go, but I think it's gonna get released sometime on the 22nd of August, okay? Regardless, I am planning on releasing the final 3 videos of this game much later this year, but I'm also planning on releasing 2 more bonus episodes on 2 different months as well, besides those 3 episodes, okay? So this isn't the last of Kirby Star Allies, you'll see. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I've had a lot of fun playing this game, and of course, I'll see you guys next time when I come back for the next episode to go through even more of this game, so that we can tackle through now all the bosses in the Ultimate Choice, which are going to follow through the same logic as with Story Mode and Guest Star Heroes, but a little differently. Until next time, guys, bye.